I'd like to get started because what I think is that our next two speakers have really approached this in a very creative way because they're using mapping and technology, but they're also finding a way to engage everyday people in this process. And this is what this is really about. It's about demystifying. It's about taking what may feel like gobbledygook, what might feel like it's intimidating, and saying, no, we have the power to map in our own hands. So the first person I'd like to introduce is David Thornburg, who comes from Committee of 70 in Philadelphia. He heads it up. And really, actually, the very creative thing that he's created is a project called Draw the Lines PA. And I'll let him describe it a little bit more, but what's amazing is that they're really making an effort to go throughout Pennsylvania to engage people in some exercises to think about what values redistricting should embody, and then also putting the power of drawing those maps into people's hands. And we've brainstormed a little bit about what that could look like, and it's pretty thrilling. You've heard over the course of the last 2 days a couple of examples of that kind of thing, whether it's a redistricting redistricting competition, or a parallel commission, or some kind of exercise where people can submit maps to a body that those maps get published, or they get evaluated by the public, or they get crowdsourced with comments. And so that's a little bit of what we're talking about right now, right? It doesn't matter who the end arbiter is. It could be the legislature. It could be a citizens commission. This is really sort of an entry point for a lot of people to be able to do this. Some states that have carried out competitions very effectively include, for instance, Ohio, North Carolina. They did it in Virginia, right? And Minnesota. Those states have been able to run competitions that in many cases produced maps that, as I said, the courts ultimately looked at and said, that's better than what the legislature drew. We'll take it. It makes it a lot easier for them because the process has also had a lot of public input. So they know that it wasn't just drawn in a basement, that it really reflects a lot of people's input. The second person that I want to introduce is Blake Esselstyn. And Blake actually was part of a project that Common Cause did in collaboration with Duke University to have a simulated commission where people could provide testimony, and where we could really run through the idea of what would it be like if North Carolina had an open process and people submitted maps. And we really took the input from that testimony and put it into maps. So Blake will be talking about that project and how it is that we can kind of use those parallel processes, sometimes to shame the legislature, sometimes to hold them accountable, and sometimes just to give an alternative to the courts, right? It's a way, again, as I said, to open up the conversation as we talk about what those maps should look like. All of you all should be having pen and pad out to also collect stories, people talking about, wow, I didn't realize a line went through my neighborhood, and then thinking about the reasons why and what the impact is. The more stories that we can gather that are paired with those real maps, the better. I'll just end before we I'll hand the microphone over to you, is just in California, when we had the Citizens Redistricting Commission, we did not mandate that they would have live mapping on gigantic screens behind them. But when you give the process over to a group of people who don't have a vested interest in hiding mapping from the public's view, they came up with the idea that was like, well, as people are giving testimony, why shouldn't we have a screen up? Why don't we have a demographer next to us? Why don't they put the maps up and just capture that information so people can see it real time? And as we're deliberating about moving a line this way or that to respond to testimony, why don't we just have it up on screen so everybody can see what we're doing? They can see the plus or minus of the population that's moving in and out. And so you can imagine that kind of transparency, even just imagining what's possible, can be huge for folks. So I would say that people should think outside the box about what you can bring to your own states to open up the process. And with that, I'd like to invite David Thornburg up to talk about the Committee of 70s project.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you for your terrific leadership on this issue, for putting this together with the folks at Duke. I'm going to try to multitask here, which is to bring up my little presentation. This is what we call technology transfer. And Terrific. So far, so good. We can see it. Whoa. I just thought I'd show you slides from my vacation.
Do you want to talk?
Let me, I'll give you the preliminaries while Suzanne is pulling this up. Just to preview the first slide. So I run the Committee of 70 in Philadelphia, which is an old line, nonpartisan, nonprofit reform group based in Philadelphia. We were a child of the last progressive era, 1904, founded by a group of business and civic leaders who thought things were not right with politics and democracy. So it's a good thing we figured that out over the years. And we are in today's parlance, a grass tops organization. I mean, these are sort of leading lights from the, there we go, from the business and civic community who really do care about the issues that we're here to talk about, maybe for a somewhat a different set of interests than others. And I would only say about the curious name, the Committee of 70, if you're a biblical scholar of the Old Testament, you know the reference. If you don't, well, you just have to figure it out. But I wanted to first just situate our context in Pennsylvania right now. And I'm not going to read this through line by line because, it gets a little, it's a challenging context in which we're operating. We share that challenging context with, I'll say, other states that don't have direct democracy or access to initiative or referendum. And just a show of hands, how many folks find themselves in that situation? States that don't, yeah, I know there's, yeah, you North Carolinians, any of you North Carolinians, right? It is exponentially more difficult to run political reforms like this through because you're only left with trying to work through the sausage factory to convince a set of folks who were elected by a set of rules that they needed to change that set of rules so that in their minds somebody else might beat them, which is a tough sell, but requires us to get more creative and more artful in what we do. Right now, we also, and by the way, just to the top line here, I think we can make claim, others have, but I think we can make good claim to being a poster child, the poster child for partisan gerrymandering, if for no other reason that, as I recall, we are literally the first chapter in Dave Daley's book, Gerrymandered Nation. So, or whatever it's called. We can, spar with other states for that honor. Our story right now is that we have a divided government. We have a strongly Republican House and a Republican Senate, a Democratic governor, and a Supreme Court with we elect our Supreme Court and it has a Democratic majority. This issue has come on strong in Pennsylvania the last couple of years. Some of you, I don't think there's anyone from Fair Districts, Pennsylvania here, unless I'm missing that. Fair Districts has done an enormously successful job of organizing the grassroots in Pennsylvania. Probably 20 or 30,000 folks have been involved in that. Tried to run a constitutional amendment to change the way we draw maps, to create an independent commission, which failed at least temporarily. The clock's running out to do this in time for 2021, but hope springs eternal. So that amendment failed, and then our governor was reelected, and about 2 or 3 weeks after he was elected, he, by executive order, created a redistricting reform advisory commission and asked me to chair it. So I have some work to do over the next 6 months, and these sessions have been enormously helpful to get some ideas about how we can do that. All of this suggested to us that I've always been fond of the advice that says if you can't win a game by a certain set of rules, you have to change the game. So that got us thinking about how we could change the game, introduce new streams of ideas, new practices, new voices into this pursuit. And I think we realized that we're at a time in history, maybe the first time in the history of our republic, where a broad swath of voters have within reach everything they need to participate actively in this process of drawing maps. I mean, Kathy mentioned there were states, Virginia, Ohio, a couple others, who used this sort of public mapping software to good effect previously in 2011. But we thought to ourselves, and we actually did something like that in Philadelphia around city council districts, but we thought to ourselves, let's see if we can blow that out of the water and really expand that idea as broadly and completely as we could in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to see if we can use this as a tool to engage people in the issue and create more active ownership of that issue. We were inspired by a reasonably well-known story in Pennsylvania. I'm a little hesitant to engage the video technology here, so I won't play this video, but I encourage you to go look at it. Encouraged by a story from 2011, when a 29-year-old piano teacher from the Allentown area, sort of northeastern part of the state, named Amanda Holt, took it upon herself to challenge the state legislative maps that were being put forward and took them to court and won. And she did that because she was offended by the number of counties and municipalities that have been split. But her tool was that she decided to draw her own maps. And at the time, she drew these maps with just a spreadsheet of population and some crude maps that she downloaded from the internet. And it is quite a story. She is not college educated. She's a piano teacher, as I said, but she's always enjoyed puzzles, and she is just a super citizen. A Republican, by the way, and she was challenging maps drafted with Republican intent. So that's the Amanda Holt story, and we thought to ourselves, what if we were able to create a groundswell of, say, 10,000 Amanda Holts across the Commonwealth over the next 4 years, so that wherever you turn, somebody is not just talking about gerrymandering and fair districts and fair maps, but actually actively engaged in that pursuit. So that's what turned into what we've called Draw the Lines, and what I think of as a campaign. It's a mapping campaign, it's a communications campaign, it's an engagement campaign that we've created around this project. So the basics of it is we use the same software that used in 2011 called District Builder, which was built by a Philadelphia-based firm called Azavia. And we said, let's put that in the hands of anybody that wants it in Pennsylvania. Give them the data, give them the software, and encourage them to start drawing maps. We had to raise some money to do that, and we were successful. I think we hit the right mix of ideas and the right timing. And we decided, rather than just sort of throw the software out there and see what happened, that we would build it into a larger information and engagement campaign. So there's a website, which is Draw the Lines PA, the District Builder software. In a state like Pennsylvania, we needed to have regional leadership. It's such a big state that folks don't know each other or trust each other statewide. We needed to develop social media assets, and to launch this whole thing, we did kind of an old-fashioned barnstorming tour across the Commonwealth with a bunch of events that we got a few thousand people to turn out for. And most important, because people like competitions, and again, modeled after what we'd seen before, we said, let's turn it into a competition. Let's put up some prize money. Let's play that competition out in 3 age brackets, so high school, college, and adult, and let the games begin. So you're now catching us at just having finished the evaluation process, the mapping, judging process. And I should say that we were very careful to assemble a team of judges with credibility and trust and a bipartisan feel. One of the judges is a former governor, Republican Governor Mark Schweiker. We have a former Republican Superior Court judge. a former U.S. attorney who was a Democrat, a woman from the religious organizations, and an African-American civic leader from Philadelphia. So we tried to cover our territory. So the results are in, and I'm not going to spill the beans, but in 2 weeks we're going to be awarding $5,000 checks to 3 individuals from across the Commonwealth who have submitted, in our view, the superior maps. We had about 1,500 people enter the process, created 2,500 draft maps, which then turned into 318 submissions. So we're not quite sure what sort of trickled down from 2,500 to 318, but that's what we'll try to figure out in the future. And by the way, we asked people to create congressional districts. We have 18 in Pennsylvania. So rather than wade right into the 203 state house seats, we said, let's start with the congressional districts. And February 6th in Harrisburg, we'll be awarding these prizes. This is the most, as far as we know, the most extensive experiment, what we call do-it-yourself democracy, in clearly the Commonwealth's history. And I'll talk a little bit later about what opportunities that's opened up. But for the time being, I just threw a couple of pictures up there of some of the folks who have engaged. So there's a 16-year-old guy named Kyle from State College who killed it. Somehow came up with 14 competitive districts in the Commonwealth, which folks said you couldn't do that because, you know, all the Democrats are clustered in around the big cities and so forth and so on. This young woman named Elise from a little town called Hollidaysburg, which is near and dear to my heart because that's my wife's hometown, town of 6,000 people in south central Pennsylvania. This other young guy is a 15-year-old from Pittsburgh. 2 young women from Temple University in Philadelphia, a young man from Roman Catholic High School in Philadelphia whose entire class participated, and then a team from Mercyhurst College up in Erie. We had a lot of schools participate, both high school and college universities, participate as teams. Parenthetically, educators, like, if you're into this, just do somersaults. They love this because it's an integrating project. If you're teaching government or civics or some such, it brings a lot of things together. It's hands-on, and it involves people in a very creative way. Whoops. This is the website that we use to, I just want to sort of walk you through the process that we encourage people to go through in order to participate in this. I think early on we realized and encouraged others to realize that this is not a technical exercise. If you show up at the mapping software with no idea of what you're trying to do, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to learn something, not only about the gerrymandering issue and how it plays in Pennsylvania, but more important, you have to think hard yourself, and ideally think with others in your classroom or your community, or as Kathy suggested, find different ways to engage others in the conversation about the underlying values that you're trying to express in the map. And we actually developed a set of flashcards. We call them the value cards. That each one of which spoke to one of the values that you could bring to map drawing. And we encourage people to put them in rank order. You know, which do you care most about and which do you care least about? And there's room for a wild card. And we said to people, if you want to put incumbent protection in there, that's fine. We didn't have many takers on that. But you've got to leave the door open. So these are the values that we put in front of people, and a couple things. It created a platform for some interesting conversations. Folks realized that, oh yeah, you do have to think about what you're trying to do before you map something, and you can't have it all. You can't equally solve all 5 or 6 or 8 of these problems or challenges, address these values. So there's got to be some trade-offs, and that gets, of course, more interesting when you engage in a conversation with someone next to you who's got a totally different set of values. This is the District Builder software tool. It's free, it's online. If you'd like to do your bit for Pennsylvania, you're welcome to sign on and give it a go. We are just launching the second round of the competition this spring. We're going to do 17 districts rather than 18 on the likelihood that we're going to lose a congressional district after the next census. So if you're from Pennsylvania and you want a shot at winning valuable prizes, well, we welcome you. Just a couple of quick lessons, and then I'm going to turn things over to Blake. We have found, this has realized a lot of the hopes and ambitions that we had for the project. It really does engage people in a very powerful way because it gives them ownership. It's one thing to talk in abstract terms about this map and that map and the values and the process and so forth, but there's something about the okay, here's the keys, you drive it. That unlocks a different way of thinking and I said an important ownership. It does model, and I think to Kathy's point earlier, we're trying to create these sort of parallel processes since we don't have a citizens initiative process. It gives us a chance to model the right kinds of public conversations about values, which is where we believe this has to start. It demystifies this, and it puts a human face on this. The fact that, here's this 16-year-old kid named Kyle, who happens to be in the district of a very powerful Republican state senator. So, of course, part of what we're encouraging people is, once you finish your maps, gives you a chance to go visit the district office and talk about redistricting and the map and the choices and so forth and so on. So that's the next part of our strategy. Ultimately, our hope is this creates a new source of political power. And I think that goes to what I said earlier. In creating a new game, you create a new set of players motivated by a different set of motivations than we might have had before. I mentioned that educators love it and the media loves this. Just the simple statement that a 15-year-old kid can do better than not only the legislators in the dark room, but with all due respect to PhD mathematicians, to the mathematicians who engage in this kind of stuff. Finally, this is just sort of one of the things we tried to promote. I'll plead guilty, and not to speak for you, but sometimes folks, we in this business can suffer from a little terminal earnestness, which I think sometimes gets in our way. And this is just plain fun. This is fun. This is turning this into, something you talk about, you compete around, you share with friends, neighbors, and families. So that is Draw the Lines. There's my email, and here's a special one-time offer. If you want a set of these cards, just send us an email at info@drawthelinespa. And we'll be happy to send them to you. We're more than happy. We've had a number of conversations with folks around the country about how to jumpstart this kind of thing in your state. So if that feels useful, we'd be happy to pick up that conversation as well. Now, here comes the handoff. I'm going to go back to these values cards, and here's the exercise. Blake is going to show up in a minute with an actual bit of mapping software, not the one we used, but one that he's got set up to use in North Carolina. And we wanted to do a little audience participation around all this to give you a sense of what it's all about. So here's what I want you to do. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total values here. Just quickly jot them down. Population, you can do your own little shorthand. Contiguity, which means the thing has to stick together. Or you could take a picture. You guys, I'll tell you, it's about technology. Take a picture of the picture. And the other thing I would ask you to do, if it's reasonably convenient, situate one laptop per table. In just a minute, but not yet, because Blake's going to want to draw on this discussion about values, but put you to work mapping. And here's what I want you to do in the next couple of minutes while Blake is transferring the technology. Think for a second to yourself about what you care about among these values, and then engage in a conversation with the other folks at your table to see if you can come to some consensus about the values that you and your little community your table of one care about most. Because Blake is then going to put you to work trying to draw a little map of a part of North Carolina. So that's that. Thanks for the chance to share that with you. I brought along a couple of little information cards if you want to pick one of those up. I have about 20 of them or so. Happy to talk to you afterward. And now I'm going to turn things over to Blake. So thanks very much.
All right. I think we're good to go. So I realize that the title of this session is The Latest Mapping Technology, and both David and I come up here and are brandishing pieces of paper. But actually, there will be an opportunity for folks to get to experience the technology. As we said, hopefully there will be folks on laptops. The intent is to have an exercise to let people actually use it themselves. I will be doing a brief demo as well. I will probably spend about 2 minutes. I really want to allow time for that and allow time for the discussions that David mentioned. So maybe spend about 2 minutes talking about some background, maybe 3 minutes on the demo, and then turn it over to you all to get a chance to experience both the discussions around the values, but also if you've got a laptop, the software is freely available on the web. So we'll dive into it that way. I want to say thank you to the hosts, to the sponsors, to the organizers, to David, all the speakers, really. This has been wonderfully informative. And thank you to all of you for coming and staying this late on a lovely Saturday afternoon. The exercise we're going to be doing, the way I've set it up, is to be looking at one county in North Carolina and dividing that one county into 3 districts. So you can think about these as either state house districts or county commission districts, but the county is Forsyth County, a little bit west of here. It is the county that is, I'm seeing a nod, it's the county that is home to the city of Winston-Salem. It's a relatively balanced county politically. It is also a relatively diverse county, and it's relatively rectangular, so it fits nicely in the screen, which is helpful. We're going to be using a piece of software called DRA. I want to emphasize that I'm not promoting this software over any other. It just happens to be well suited towards this type of exercise. It's available for the whole country, and it's free on the web, as I said. But there are other pieces of software out there. I actually, on the flip side of the instructions that we'll be handing out, is a list of other software products and other technologies. So I hope folks will take a look at this maybe after the session. Take it home with you if you'd like, but the backside has a bunch of information about other technology. So DRA, the software, stands for Dave's Redistricting App. And people often wonder, who is Dave? And it's not my co-panelist. Dave is Dave Bradley. He's a former Microsoft engineer, lives in Seattle, and he's a nice guy. And basically, the previous version, he did solely as a volunteer effort to further the cause of public participation in this conversation. For the 2020, he's got some other people on board. It's a team effort now, but it's still called Dave's Redistricting App. And it is in beta. So that we're going to be using the newer version. It's beta, but it's fairly stable. And we'll cross our fingers that everything should run and that the internet will stay fast for everybody in here. I also want to introduce Brent Lawrence, who's with North Carolina Common Cause. He and I worked together as map drawers when we did the simulation that Kathy mentioned of the Independent Commission in North Carolina. And Brent is also familiar with DRA. And as we get into the exercise, if you have a question, please raise your hand and Brent or I will come and see if we can help you out. And Brent and Marika will also be handing out these instructions I mentioned at the end of the demo. And with that, why don't we jump into the demonstration? Okay, can you hear me on this mic? All right, I'll try to get all things arranged here. So you might see this is the interface, and the central part of it looks very familiar to other web maps. If you are navigating it, it's very, very similar. You can zoom in by scrolling. I'm just using my scroll wheel here, and then you can drag it. You can also zoom and pan in and out by using the plus and minus up here in the top left. So that way, it looks very much like a familiar web map. But now, are there people in here who, if they were drawing a map, would want to ignore partisan data? Any hands? I see some hands. Okay. So conveniently, there's a way to do that. On the instruction sheet, it's instruction 12. I'm not going to go into details. It's simple enough. But for the time being, I'd like you all to close your eyes because I'm going to show some partisan data. If you check this box here, close your eyes if you don't want to see this. You can see the partisanship of Forsyth County. It's fairly striking, actually. But we'll turn it off. And now, people can open their eyes. We will also, you can see demographics. So if you're interested, for example, in making sure that you have districts that satisfy the Voting Rights Act, there are different options here. But if you do all groups, you can see that there's a diversity, as I said, and the orangish color is mostly white precincts. All of these shapes are precincts. So that's another thing you can turn on, or you can just leave the roadmap. I'm going to do that for simplicity right now. And then once you're zoomed in, and I might zoom in. No, I think that's a good level of zoom. Once you're zoomed in like this, you want to switch to the coloring mode, and you click on this, you'll see it turns red. And then basically you choose your color over here, and it kind of functions like a crayon. I'm going to choose green, and I can either drag, swipe in color, or I can click like this. Very straightforward. And if I want to change colors, I'm going to go and click on the yellow here. And again, I can either just click these individual precincts, technically they're VTDs, or I can drag, something like that. But in the interest of speed, there's also a trick here. If I hold down the Command key on my Macintosh, or it's the Control key on Windows, I'm going to hold down that key, and now if I drag, I can do a whole rectangle. So I'm going to do a whole bunch of green. And I want to point out here that as I'm doing this, on the right-hand side, these statistics for District 1, the green district, are being updated live. That'll be clear too when I'll go back to the yellow district, because I'm going to leave this one where it is. You can see I got the population to within 851 people of my ideal. And that's up here. That's good. We're basically shooting for less than 5,000 deviation. And you can see that this is a very competitive district. Down here, we've got the PVI, which is the Partisan Voting Index, over in the right-hand column here. And so this is an R plus 0.079. And 538 considers, with the PVI, anything basically under 5 is sort of a swing. It's a district that's in play. So I ended up making a competitive district, and it meets the population standards. I'm going to go back to my yellow here. And notice also that while I'm hovering over these, I get statistics up in that there's that box that pops up on the right side. So I can see for this specific VTD, for example, that the Black voting age population is 5.7%. And I can see what the populations of these, the demographics, as well as the political leanings of that. So I'm going to, in the interest of speed, again, I'm going to use my command key here and draw a rectangle. And look at that. I got within 5,000 again here for the yellow. And so now I'm satisfied with the yellow and blue. I'm going to click on the lock. And that means that they won't get changed anymore, even if I draw on them with the purple. That'll prevent further changes. I'm going to do one more rectangle. And okay, in not much time, I've created a compliant plan here. All of these districts are within 5,000 people of deviation. And this district I'm in, number 2, is a very strong Democratic district, D+9. But if I click on 3, you can see that that is competitive. And District 1 is also competitive. I guess in David's term about values, it seems like my value here is a horizontalness. I don't think it's a particularly admirable districting plan, but I think I've covered what I needed to cover. We're going to be handing out the instructions. And in the meantime, if folks don't have a laptop or don't have a way of engaging with this, I think the conversation just about which values you think are important could be fruitful. And if someone wants to come up, I can erase these districts. And if someone wants to come up and play on my computer, that's more than welcome as well. It's just one per table. Stack.
So Blake and I just huddled up, and we thought we would cut things short now and give you a chance to ask questions of him or me. Our intent here was just to introduce the ways in which, one way in which this now, freely available software can be put to use in this pursuit, and just to give you a little hands-on touch. And I thought Blake's little cheat sheet guide is really helpful. So, questions for either me or Blake. Suzanne's got a microphone back there. There's a couple of questions over there. Do you have a microphone?
Yeah, I just like some definition or more explanation on these values. Like, can you explain the difference between contiguity and compactness? And can you talk about the difference between communities of interest and minority representation? And then can you talk and sort of explain more what jurisdictional splits really means?
Yeah. The physical cards have a little bit of explanation on the back, but these are terms of art. So it's really up to you. I mean, some of them, contiguity means the district has to literally, the different pieces of it have to flow together in some meaningful way, not just be held together by a little sliver. Compactness is, the mathematicians have scores for it, but it's got to be, more compact rather than more strung out. Minority representation, we're talking about Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which has been interpreted in all kinds of ways. But the point of the exercise is to just work with the basic concept and then rank them, and then engage in the conversation with others to see how you sort things out. Because again, the biggest revelation is you can't have it all. But the basic, the underlying premise of the exercise is these are conversations we should have in the open among and between regular folks who have a stake in this, and not just be handed a map after people emerge from the dark room. Question here. Suzanne's coming.
I think this is amazing what you've shown us today and really important for citizen engagement. And sort of as an add-on to that question, as this maybe takes off and more states or more communities are engaged in this way, are you providing or is there an effort to provide like a blue book or a handbook for citizens to understand what are the constitutional requirements, what are Voting Rights Act requirements, what do the states require, and how does that differ from congressional requirements, so that citizens are being impactful and efficient with their use of this?
Yeah. Well, we've tried to answer some of those questions on our Draw the Lines PA website. This is a ship that or a plane that we're building as we're flying it. So, and we intend to do this over the next three or 4 years. So with each round, I expect we will get deeper and deeper into the kind of resources and questions that you talk about. And as I mentioned earlier, we're happy to talk to folks in other states on how to, keep advancing the state of practice, because we're having fun with this, and think it's a pretty cool way of, again, literally putting the people in control of this process. And it at the very least, I may have said this, you can no longer say like, yeah, you don't know how to do this, because like here's a 15-year-old kid who just figured out how to do it. So other questions? Yes.
Demko from the League of Women Voters of Wake County, and we are interested in ways to educate the public about redistricting. It strikes me, and this is probably for Blake, that using this software, maybe using this software as part of an educational program for some enlightened citizens might be interesting. Sorry. Have you had any experience in using this software to educate the public?
I think my co-panelist here actually is much more qualified to talk about an experience like that. As I mentioned before, I was involved in the project where we use this software to simulate an independent redistricting commission. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina, and we've had some issues with districts, city council districts being imposed on the city, and we've had conversations about having a public education effort when that the sort of outcome related to that becomes a little more clear. Beyond that, outside of sort of educational settings, actually when I'm teaching a class or something, I have not.
Let me just throw a couple of ideas that we're all sort of rolling these out and piloting these. Service organizations, retirement communities, Girl Scout troops, Boy Scout troops, all, whenever a few people are gathered, gives you an opportunity to use the tool. And you have to look for ways, if people are intimidated by the technology, we've enlisted some younger sort of technology folks as what we call them as digital Sherpas, who might be willing to go to a retirement community or someplace where folks are less comfortable in digging into the technology. And you can split this into two, where you essentially have the conversation about what we're trying to accomplish here, and then hand it over to a mapper. And then you encourage the interaction. Well, that's not quite right. No, I don't like that, but try this. So there are ways to get past that if that's a barrier. Looks like our time has come. One more question.
Hi, Sam Wong from Princeton. I have a question, I think, mostly for Blake and also for lawyers in the room who are experts in federal district drawing, having to do with mostly DRA, also district builder. My first question is, does it appear to have the capacity for people who want to draw their communities of interest to draw those communities and then archive them or share them so that there can be a community look at what everybody in a state thinks are all the communities of interest? You see what I'm saying? So like we hear about that a lot. So if you say, look, my town really cares about this, I'm wondering whether these tools have the capacity to crowdsource that kind of COI drawing.
I think the short answer is yes. And I actually used to work at Azavia, which is the company that built District Builder. And I know they have a very capable staff. And the good news is that they're working on their next generation for 2020, and they're open to input. And I think a lot of their implementations are customized, and that's certainly something I don't see any technological reason why that couldn't happen. And then with Dave's redistricting app, they're also wanting, they've got this beta out well before the 2020 census, so I think it's in the realm of possibility.
That's the most challenging piece because it's not easily sort of captured. The best we've come
No, but
so
communities
far,
will know that, and so they can just
No,
use the
I
software.
understand. No, I know. What we've encouraged folks to do is to submit. We have such a big and diverse state that it's hard for anybody to grasp, what somebody else in the Northwest, if you're in the Southeast, what the Northwest cares about. So we've encouraged folks to submit what we call hometown portraits that describe their community and how it hangs together and what community means to them, and create sort of a trading floor.
And I wanted to plant a seed because afterwards I wanted to ask you all and also the lawyers, how would one use software like this to draw something that was Voting Rights Act compliant? So the idea being not just majority minority, but are there things that are simple enough to implement in software so that one could actually show VRA compliance? And I just wanted to plant that with people because that's a thing that would help communities make a real legal contribution in this space in the next cycle. And I just wanted to just throw that out there.
I mean, my sense is there's not uniform agreement on what constitutes a district that is VRA compliant. That's still something that's a matter for discussion. But if there were some standard, I know, for example, the special master had a numeric target, and it would be very easy to say, have a light go on that says, yes, you've met this target. I think we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.